Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is David Breer, and welcome to episode 42 of the 11FS FinTech Insider Breakfast Show. In this show, we bring you the best and the brightest from around the fintech and banking landscape every single weekday, straight into your homes at 8:30 BST, live here on LinkedIn. Today, I am thrilled to be joined by Ryan Garner. Ryan is a principal customer and product lead at 11FS. And today, we're going to be talking about what 11FS's new research report on US SMBs is saying, what business owners need right now, and how to design digital financial services specifically for those guys as well. How's it going, Ryan? Thanks for getting up early and chatting to me this morning.
Oh, no problem at all. This is not early for me, I would say. I'm normally up at kind of 6 working with clients on the other side of the world. So this is kind of almost midday for me.
Yeah, you've been doing that sort of Far East shift for a little bit, haven't you? It takes a little bit of time to kind of get out of that routine as well, doesn't it?
Yeah, I do. This is my break, so this is good timing.
Do you know, I have a similar routine, but it's called 2 children, who essentially will keep me wake me up super early in terms of whatever I think it should be. But thank you so much for everybody who's joining us over on LinkedIn. As always, we love kind of getting questions for you guys. So if you've got any questions for Ryan or myself as we're going through this, chuck them into to LinkedIn, and we'll sort of weave them into the conversation. But great to see so many of you guys coming in and kind of keeping supporting us. Good morning, Tony. How are you doing? Paul Kane, good morning. Adana, good morning. Great to see you again. Amira, all the way from Pakistan this morning. Thank you very much for joining. Hope you guys are all well. Some people a little bit closer to home. Paul Kane, all the way from sunny Scotland. So Pakistan, Scotland. Different level of effort, but we love you both the same. So thank you very much for joining us. Ryan, tell us a little bit more about for anybody who doesn't know your role at 11FS and what we've been up to. I mean, this project has been going for quite some time now, and that probably says a lot about the sort of detail of the findings that you guys have really gone into.
Yeah, so I've been at 11FS now for well over 2 years, and I was kind of thinking about it the other day. It was interesting when we kind of first started speaking, David, back towards the end of kind of 2017, and you and Jason were keen to add more depth to the customer strategy side of what you were doing, and how could you go about doing that. And at the time we felt that Jobs to be Done was a great kind of approach that we could use to kind of fill that gap. And I've done a bit of work with you on Metal back kind of years ago now, and we wanted to kind of bring that into 11FS, and that has now become a staple now of a lot of the work that we do when we design and build new ventures across a variety of different regions of the world, and in a variety of different financial service verticals. So yeah, Jobs to be Done has kind of become the heart and soul of the products and services that we build. And that's kind of just blossomed out a little bit as well over the past 6 to 12 months as we start to add more layers to Jobs to be Done. And I think some of the report that we've published has kind of demonstrated some of the depth that we go into beyond Jobs to be Done now. So yeah, that's kind of what I'm doing and what I have been doing at 11FS for a while.
It's funny. I mean, I've done. I mean, in the 4 years that we've been sort of running 11FS, I've done pretty much been involved in all of the interview processes through that period of time. I think the last 6 months now we've got Mike and his team involved. I'm doing a little bit less of it, but I remember your interview so vividly just because of how passionate you were about doing it. And obviously we'd worked together, like you say, with the Metal side of things. But I remember exactly where I was sat when we were having that interview in floor 4 of the WeWork where we were at the time. So it's interesting. And like you say, the Jobs to be Done approach has become not just the things that we do for other people, but I mean, Ryan, our COO, uses it for work that we do internally. I know the Pulse team, the Foundry team, everybody internally sort of uses Jobs to be Done as a way for us of just rationalizing it. But for anybody sort of listening to this who doesn't have a kind of a background in Jobs to be Done, can you just give us a bit of an overview of what it is and why we feel it's such an impactful way of going about it?
Sure, yeah. I mean, Jobs to be Done is an approach we use to understand why customers, or businesses for that matter, choose one product or service over another. And kind of we do this by I guess kind of working backwards. So from the outcomes that are most important to customers, and then figuring out what are the obstacles that are kind of getting in their way to reaching those outcomes. And so it's not necessarily kind of focused on the product from the outset. It's focused on the outcomes the customers are trying to achieve. And when you kind of focus on what the customer is trying to get done, you unlock a whole load of interesting opportunities that you may have missed if you were just focused on the user journey of your own product or service that you have in market today. And I think this is particularly pertinent in the banking industry, which is why I was so excited speaking to you 2.5 years ago about coming to do this in fintech, because it's just going through this huge shift from kind of offline analog products to kind of truly digital services. And effectively, Jobs to be Done is a way of identifying underserved areas of the market where you can insert new digital services that are going to add an enormous amount of value to customers and businesses over time.
And it was originally a Clayton Christensen methodology, wasn't it, that he and his team sort of put together. I think it's evolved so much since then, hasn't it? And I think the thing that I really love about Jobs to be Done is, I mean, I used to work at Gartner. I've seen a lot of people put a lot of effort into research, and then somebody will take 2 statistics out of something, and then the rest of it goes in a drawer. The thing I really love about Jobs to be Done is it's a living, breathing thing. It's more a body of work than it is an output, if that makes sense. Because you create those jobs, you understand the themes, it informs your roadmap when you're building something. But every time you have conversations with customers, you add to it and you keep bringing things to it, which I think is the best way for these things. It becomes almost research as a service rather than research as a report, if that makes sense, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. And it's grown out of kind of Harvard Business School, Clayton Christensen, disruption theory, all of that kind of great kind of business school thinking that has gone into much of the innovation over the past 20 or 30 years. And from that, you're right, it's kind of forked in lots of different directions. And the Jobs to be Done we do at 11FS is different to some of the Jobs to be Done that's done elsewhere in the world. And that's because we're taking the core principles of it and applying it to financial services and the position within which financial services is in today. And yeah, there's a range of research methodologies and techniques that we use, but the core to it is speaking to customers directly and asking them the right questions, and not just throwing out a load of statistics. It's unlocking those really rich and detailed stories that customers have.
Tell us a little bit more about the report then. So it's particularly focused on US SMBs right now, and I mean those guys are having a pretty tough time, aren't they? With not just COVID, but actually pre that, the life of an SMB is a pretty difficult one, isn't it? So tell us a little bit more about the research and tell us a little bit more about what the findings of the report was.
Yeah, sure. So this was a really interesting area for us because, I mean, as many of the listeners will know, we have quite a strong set of experience and background in working or building things for SMBs in the UK, and we could start to see these trends happening in the US too. And so we kind of really wanted to look at where the opportunity space was for any kind of bank or financial provider looking to serve those SMBs and help them with their financial management. And so the report has been designed to do 2 primary things. One is to provide insight into the jobs to be done that SMBs have right now, where the opportunity space is for digital service design, how you go about designing a brand that's going to have a real cut through with the audience going to relate. And so you've got all those insights in there, as you'd expect with any kind of research into that space. But the second thing it does is it opens up some of the toolbox that 11FS has, and the kind of the tools and techniques that we've been using over the past few years to build and design these digital services that we do. So everything from how do we do jobs to be done, how do we translate those jobs into an MLP, how do we relate the jobs to be done back to the roadmap, How do we go into designing brands? What are the kind of different techniques and activities we do to kind of do that? How do we translate really deep kind of cultural research into something that's going to resonate from a kind of a message and a marketing point of view? All that's in there, and so it's a fairly long report, but it's also a handbook for how you take the insight that we produced and go and use it. And actually, you know, for anyone listening to this and interested in kind of using these insights, I would urge you to kind of take what we've written in there and use some of those tools and techniques and go and do it yourself. I'd love it if someone picked up this report and came back in 6 to 9 months' time and said, "Here you go, look what I produced off the back of this."
Yeah, I mean, this, like I say, it's the, so this is what we did differently is always the kind of impacts that you're looking for, isn't it? But so what do small business owners really want from financial services then? Because I mean, me and you've done a, like say, from metal with NatWest to a few different sort of looks at SMEs, SMBs. Their needs are very complex. You know, it's a much more difficult market than the retail market to address, isn't it?
Yeah. And, you know, if I'm being truthful about this, you know, having spoken to a lot of different SMBs, their story's kind of the same in many respects. They want financial services to be invisible. They want it to be hassle-free. They want to not work their evenings, stressing over spreadsheets and reconciliation and worrying about cash flow. They want to use those evenings to, you know, go to the beach with their kids and, you know, have that family time. And so financial services is something that they just don't have the skill or competency to get their head around. They know it's absolutely fundamental to their business and to the success of their business, but they need someone just to step in and handle that for them. And if you kind of start to then probe on what that looks like, that doesn't look like a rigid financial product at all. It's more of this kind of digital assistant that can go, I tell you what, I'm just going to preempt, there's going to be a bit of a cash flow problem here. You've got some invoices outstanding, you've not got enough money coming in, should we just plug that gap for you? Or I tell you what, if you listen to the podcast we did last week that went out last Friday on FinTech Insider, we had one of the small businesses that we interviewed as part of the research on the show, and her name's Joanne Barrett, and she's a co-founder and owner of Aroma's Boutique Bakery in New York. And she was brilliant on the show, and she really kind of brought this whole thing to life. And she talked about having like a Chase bank account, but she also talked about having a Square account. And if you listen to how she was talking about using those different services, it was very evident that Square had kind of disintermediated that customer relationship part of the process. And Joanne had much more of a stronger connection with Square than she did with Chase. And that's because the intelligence of the services that Square offered, everything from kind of point of sale payments through to identifying cash flow crunches, right through to the thing that she actually pinpointed the most was the flexible loans that they offered that were only repayable when money came back into the business. And for her, that meant that she could go and grow her business in new areas without having to worry too much about the rigidity of those loan repayments. And that was a real game changer for her. And you know what? She didn't mind paying a higher rate for it because it gave her the opportunity to grow her business. And so
I mean,
that's
really interesting because, like you say, that they're solving real problems, aren't they? At that stage, yeah. And that means those organisations are fixing real problems on a day-to-day basis for people. That's almost it's the inverse of what big incumbent financial services are really doing, because they're still providing just the financial instrument, aren't they? Whereas, you know, your example there with Joanne, that's something that sort of ties those things together, right?
Yeah, exactly. And you know, some of the kind of fintechs and the almost the kind of business platforms, it's not just Square, it's like Shopify. Shopify, within 2 weeks of lockdown, Shopify had a cash flow calculator on their website for their customers. These businesses are offering intelligent services that really help customers with their immediate and most important jobs to be done regarding financial services. And as I said before, this is something that large majority of small business owners don't understand, don't have the time to understand. Joanne just wants to bake, and she wants to sell her cakes. Her cakes look beautiful. Go and look at her website. They're amazing. We want her to be doing more of that, and we want to free up her time to do more of that, not worrying about how the financial mechanics of her business are working for or against her.
Sounds good. I mean, if you want to check that out, guys, that's over on FinTech Insider on iTunes. So it's fi.11fs.com/603. So episode 603, I guess, of FinTech Insider, but worth checking out. They always say don't do interviews with like kids and customers, but actually some of those insights were phenomenal. So, I mean, Ryan, does this sort of point to, I mean, particularly within the US market, but actually, I guess, much broader then, that the competition to the sort of big incumbent banks is not really the other banks doing something, but actually sort of almost lateral industries that are providing real value to consumers?
Yeah, I think we've talked about this a few times. When you start to look at who are the competitors to banks, I think it depends on what metrics you look at. If you look at market share metrics or kind of the value of the deposit book or whatever, banks' biggest competitors are banks. But if you start to look at this through a jobs to be done lens, which is effectively a customer lens, then the competitors to banks are these new intelligent digital services. It's the Stripes, it's the PayPals, it's the QuickBooks. We had loads of customers and small businesses that we interviewed living out of PayPal because it gave them their inflows and their outflows, a real basic view of their cash flow from the money that they were invoicing out on that platform. And all these platforms talk to each other. You can integrate Square into QuickBooks. You can integrate Stripe into Shopify. And they all start talking to each other, and they all create these lovely end-to-end journeys where data and information flows through it, and it just becomes more and more intelligent. And so from a customer's perspective, they want this to just work and for it all to talk to each other. And so for me, the scorecard has effectively changed when we move into this kind of digital world. It's no longer about how big your market share is, because as we've seen, Joanne was using Chase anyway, but she was also using Square, and most of her business was going with Square.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting, isn't it? Because at that stage, then the revenue gets sort of eaten away at, doesn't it? Because it's all about banking. Again, me and you have talked about this a number of times before, but universal banking, cross-sell, upsell. If you're providing the products, but you're not actually sort of seeing the customer with regards to the day-to-day experiences, then your ability to really create that relationship with your customer is really, really difficult. And if that's going to be now controlled by accounting packages or say payment providers who are providing real value to consumers, then I think that has a real knock-on effect down the line on how your products need to be created, the unit economics in terms of the profitability of those products, and actually how all of those things work out. But I mean, you would never have thought 15, 20 years ago that accounting would be the thing that would have potentially disintermediated banks, but you can definitely see it now. I mean, it's interesting for me as well that, I mean, even in these 4 years, Ryan, with what we've been doing, and actually, I mean, I think it's 2 years and 9 months. I think you've been in 11FS now. It feels like a hell of a lot longer, I have to say. I feel like you've probably been here longer than I have. But how the format has really evolved in that, as like you say. I mean, the very classic jobs to be done approach, I don't think quite fits in today's world in terms of how it would be implemented. But the way in which you and your team have sort of taken it and shaped it, particularly for financial services, and actually how you've extended it as well. I mean, the sort of stories to be told narrative around it. Do you want to kind of talk a little bit about that? Because I think it really adds to really the power of this as a research methodology.
Yeah, definitely. And it's something that we kind of we identified fairly early on doing jobs to be done at 11FS and financial services, and I think it always felt a little bit shallow. Jobs to be done. It's amazing at inputs into designing new products and services, but what goes beyond that? And I think stories to be told is the kind of yin to jobs to be done's yang. They kind of both interlock really, really nicely. Whereas jobs to be done is about product design, stories to be told is about product marketing. It's about how you deliver that message, how you link the message that you create for your customers and the relevancy your proposition has to the proposition itself. We're kind of moving into a world now where if you don't have a purpose, if you don't stand for things, then people are just going to ignore you. And so there are some amazing brands out there that do this really well. They'll link the purpose of their brand right through to their business model and their proposition. Lemonade's a great example. Their give back features amazing. They can communicate a really, really strong message with how they're changing insurance in the US to the story that they're telling. And to do this, we effectively, instead of consulting the customer or speaking to the customer, we go and consult the zeitgeist, the cultural trends, the deep cultural trends that are happening in the world today. And stories to be told allows us to kind of tell those stories in a much richer way. My colleague Vanessa, she always puts it in a really, really great way. She always says that if your product or service never came to market, what would the world, society, culture have missed out on? That is your story to be told. And if you can articulate that in a really strong and effective way, then you've got much, much more chance of succeeding. And this is particularly pertinent right now because fintech markets aren't what they were 3 to 4 years ago. There's so much competition. In the SMB report, we said there's over 140 fintechs competing for SMB business in the US. 140. How do you stand out from the crowd? It's really, really important.
I think the nice thing about that, when you say about the stories to be told side of things as well, is that, I mean, a lot of the challenges that often happens when you're trying to deliver things in a big organization is actually almost that internal PR around it as well. You know, how do you explain to people in a really succinct way the things that we're doing and why we need to do these things? So both in terms of, as you say, focusing for an external narrative for consumers, for the market in terms of what you're doing, and that can then shape not only how you develop the product, but the marketing around the product as well. But as somebody who's, you know, looked to kind of get many things in a client side off the ground when I was in a bank or insurance company, that internal narrative to get people to really get it in like 2 seconds is so important. And I think it changes it from a people have to go and read a 20,000 page report that I prepared internally to a view of like the nice neat narrative of why this thing exists and the impact that it will really have. So it's good to see, as you say, the things kind of evolving as the problems and the industry sort of shapes around it, I guess. I mean, yeah. You've done jobs to be done work in, I mean, I'm just trying to total it up. You've done it in Singapore, you've done it in Hong Kong, the US, UK,
Saudi Arabia
as well, Saudi. Like, Africa, I mean, yeah. I think you might be the best traveled person in 11FS at this stage. But I mean, how have you found doing it in all of these different geographies then? Because that must have been. I was saying before, I've never been to Singapore. I feel like I'm missing out. But you've been a few times and done some pretty interesting research out there.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think doing the cultural research and identifying these stories to be told when you're doing jobs to be done out in these different markets is crucial, because otherwise you just miss out on some really strong cultural behaviors and trends that shape people's behavior. For example, in Singapore, there's something called kiasu, which is this kind of mentality and mindset that Singaporeans have to continually optimize their lives. this can get quite stressful. There's a lot of pressure on young people to achieve a lot in their career, for their families and for themselves. And so how do you kind of create a balanced kind of Kiazu mindset through the digital services that you create? In Hong Kong, there's a mindset called Jetso. And this is where customers are continually trying to outsmart the system. They're trying to find deals so they can kind of improve their own kind of financial position, whether it's saving money on the things that they buy or just feeling like they're outsmarting the system. So how do you create services that help them have that feeling, help them have that emotional connection to what you're building? You can't just kind of take one thing that's built in the UK or the US and drop it in Hong Kong or Singapore, because you just don't understand the cultural context within which customers are operating. And so, yeah, if we didn't do these kinds of, this extension to jobs to be done, we wouldn't be picking up on these really, really important cultural cues for us to ground our service design in.
How have you found, and there's I mean, we're definitely sort of hitting top of the hour, so I'll have to skedaddle to get on with work at some point today. But I think the interesting thing that I kind of find on this is the jobs, there is a lot of sort of commonality sometimes, isn't there? If we sort of look at a market, but to your point, the way in which those things are addressed in different markets is fundamentally different depending on the competitive landscape, isn't it? But this report looks very heavily at the US SMB market. But do you see a lot of commonality between the other markets that you've looked at as well?
Yeah, definitely. I think, with SMBs, the mechanics are kind of the same, and actually, if we look at the UK market, for example, in SMBs, that smaller end, all of the smaller businesses, all the smaller startups serving SMBs are effectively helping them with cash flow. And if you look at the jobs to be done that we identified in the US, then one of the most important jobs to be done is helping people manage their cash flow. There are some similarities there. It's just the context within which small businesses are operating. We know that the US is a very different market to set up a business, and you've been looking at that over recent months. And so what else do you need to kind of take into consideration regarding the labor market, around digital marketing, around kind of healthcare and medical insurance and things like that? They're all super important in the setup and the financial management of your business. They don't necessarily exist in the UK, or they exist in a completely different way. And so that's where the differences start to surface. And that's where the nuances of your product and service need to accommodate those differences. So yes, there are definitely similarities. And I think, the amount of services that exist in the UK, for example, is much, much higher in that kind of smaller end of the SMB market than it is in the US. And so it'd be interesting to see over the next couple of years if that changes.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. It is a fascinating space. I mean, people reconnecting with their customers is always a good thing. I think pretty much every organization, I think, starts with like a burning desire to fix a customer problem, and somewhere over a 300-year run, then those fires can die down a little bit. But definitely for us, jobs to be done is a way for people to kind of get that burning desire back to fix real problems. And I think actually getting themselves almost out of the way of, I know what my customer wants, and really understanding those realities of that day-to-day life, isn't it? So unfortunately, I mean, it's 9 o'clock, so we better go and get on with work now, I guess, at this stage. But thank you so much for joining us this morning, Ryan. Where can people learn a little bit more about what you're up to at 11FS and actually getting their hands on that report as well?
Yeah, sure. So regarding myself, you can find me on Twitter at Ryan Garner, or indeed on LinkedIn. In terms of the report, if you go to bit.ly/digital SMB, you'll find the report, and you'll be able to download it from there.
Fantastic. All right, guys, that's all we have for you today. Tomorrow, I'm going to be joined by Claire Kalmajan, who is the Chief Innovation Officer over at SocGen. Going to be super, super interesting catching up with Claire. It's been a while, so it's going to be nice to catch up and see how everything's going over there. All we have for you today, I'm afraid. So see you same time, same place tomorrow. Stay safe, guys. Goodbye.
Thanks, bye.